Welcome to the Keen on Yoga podcast. So, if you haven't yet, leave us a review or let us know your thoughts. And also let us know other guests that you'd like us to reach out to, try and get hold of. Bear in mind that we've tried probably the many that you will ask, we've already tried and no replies yet, but you never know. Maybe you could help us. Or let us know what you want me to speak on. As you know, I like the sound of my own voice, apparently. And, happy to talk on anything. And I've done it for, all I can say is I've done the practice for a long time, since I was 19, and, probably have a bit of experience on dealing with a lot of stuff that comes up on the way. I'm happy to speak on anything. And today I thought I'd speak on negative emotions. One of my favorites, since it's, I want to say dear to my heart, not exactly dear to my heart, but, an experience that I've had a lot in my life. I started practice at the age of 19. So I was at university studying philosophy, and I thought the study of philosophy would sort everything out for me. I could understand things through understanding through my mind, and it didn't work out that way. And one day, in the end, well, not that long after starting, really, I found myself in the the psychotherapist sessions, and she said, you and everyone else, the philosophy department's here, so don't worry about it. And then I thought, you know what? That doesn't sound so good for philosophy, does it? And as well as that, it didn't sound so. It wasn't really inspiring in terms of the lecturers that I had, the professors that I had, the teachers. I kind of thought that they would be manifesting more. I mean, I know it's a judgment, but I thought they'd be manifesting more of the qualities that I would hope for someone who'd studied the mind and studied thinking that much. And, it wasn't that they were really drastically disappointing. I didn't know anything that much about them really, but, I was kind of hoping for more. And all I found was nitpicking arguments, logic, crazy kind of theoretical debates, nothing about living. And the idea, the Socratic nature of philosophy, that where it comes from, right? Socrates, the Greeks, the ancient Greeks, kind of started modern philosophy, not all philosophy, modern Western philosophy. Let's qualify that. And they said, well, what we're trying to find is wisdom, wisdom for life, and questioning life. The Socratic method is questioning life. It's questioning what the reason of living is and how to live a happy life, what our function is, as Aristotle, starts off with his Nicomachean Ethics. What's the function of man? What's our function? If we know our function and we fulfill our function, then surely we're going to be happy in fulfilling our function. That's Aristotle anyway. Socrates is just questioning everything, and we don't do that this much these days, I mean, I think we tend to accept a lot because we're kind of tired, overstimulated, overworked, and too many questions already in terms of what we have to do in life, right? There's always a question, almost moment to moment there's a question in our life. So we don't really question the bigger questions that much, or we accept the narratives that are fed to us. And I think also because society is becoming increasingly overbearing in terms of the need to conscript, the need to locate our value in the eyes of another, the cancel culture. And there's no room for the tolerance of subjectivity, the tolerance of the individual. In fact, there's very little toleration altogether, isn't there? So it's kind of a frightening position for the individual to be in, to locate all the value in society's eyes. But nevertheless, it seems like we're increasingly not encouraged, but, almost forced to do so. So anyway, that's I suppose a short introduction to the topic today. As I said, I was going to talk on negative emotions. So here I am. And the negative emotions in not just in life, I mean, obviously I said I started my quest with Ashtanga, my quest with philosophy very young, just to deal with negative emotions arising. I didn't really have any framework to deal with them, and the practice did help. It was the only thing that helped, really, and I tried, to be patently honest, I tried the psychotherapy, all types. I tried a couple of different types of meditation, and also a few different types of medication. Right. So I've been really searching around the houses for things, and all different alternative therapies, acupuncture and homeopathy and all these things, just to try and sort myself out. And then you do the Ashtanga practice, and it does work. It does it does do the job. I really, at least, it did for me, and it enabled me to come off medication, which is, incredible. I'm not suggesting you do so, but nevertheless, for me, I was able to wean myself off antidepressants in about a year. It was hard, because you kind of get addicted to them, I guess. And then I found that I was left with a sense of relative well-being, that I could actually explore things further. Before, I couldn't even ask the questions, everything was too much. I just had to blank everything out. And then I was, held by the practice in a way that I could start looking around once again and asking questions about my life and myself and in my reality. On the other hand, what it also does is stir things up. Yeah. So I'd say you have a honeymoon period in the Ashtanga practice, which is, say about a year or two, I would reckon, where you're just feeling pretty good, I mean, it is incredible as a discipline. If everyone's done any other disciplines and then they come to Ashtanga, they always say, I've done this and I've done that. And then I come to Ashtanga and I just felt amazing, and it's true. You remember your first class, right? I'm walking home. It's usually in the evening, right? You usually do a class in the evening, first of all. And you walk home and just think, oh my God, it's like floating and, this is it. This is it. I can remember those first classes, the first year or two. It still sends tingles up my spine, to be honest, right now. I was in Leamington Spa in the middle of England. I'd gone to university there. I was struggling with my finals. Lots of essays, and I tie myself up with essays. Anyway, so it just came at the right time, and it was just incredible that I did this kind of practice that I haven't even got words for it. On the other hand, what it did after a couple of years is quite the opposite. It started to bring those emotions to the surface again. So for a while, I suppose it acts as a suppressant, right? It kind of levels you out, which is great. And you need that, But after a while, if you do the job right, yeah, which is hard to avoid, really. You can do it more effectively still, more effective or less effective. But you can't really avoid doing the job of the practice if you practice regularly, yeah? And that is to stimulate the spine, and you're moving, you're breathing, you're turning the spine in all these asanas. I mean, it's so different to, say, playing football or the gym. You just don't stretch the spine continuously in all these ways. Every single movement you're doing, you're working with the flexion and extension and torsion of the spine, yeah? You don't get that in anything else, well, maybe dance or, but the way that you're doing it with bandha and the breathing is just, it creates the spine like a pressure chamber for the spine in a way, because if you do it, and again, you can do it more or less effectively in any way, to be honest. If you do this, it will work because you're moving and breathing and concentrating the attention makes a big difference as well. Yeah. And you stimulate those nerves that run up and down the spine, and they're the central nerves of the nervous system, I think, in other words, if you cut the spine, that's curtains for you. Those nerves that run up and down the spine are your central being, as it were. So when you're moving the spine, you're moving those nerves, and that stimulates all these emotions that I would suggest are stored in those nerves. I mean, emotions, thoughts, feelings. We could call it trauma. We could call it karma. They're stored in the body. Yeah, we know that. We have stuff stored in the body. It's not just stored in the mind. It has to be stored in the nerves, in the energy of the body. Somewhere. Not in non-tangible way. My suggestion is it's stored up and down the nerve of the spine, and so you're moving the spine and you're stimulating the energy, and you're not stimulating it for any good or bad reason. Let's say. I mean, as much as you're just stimulating it so it comes up again. Imagine, I often use the metaphor of sediments, right? So you lay down sediment, the sea, the sea lays down sediment, layers and layers and layers of rock. You see a cliff, right? It's got these different layers that the sea lays down. Well, that's life, isn't it? Different layers of sediment laid down. And things become more and more rigid, more and more stuck, more and more compressed, let's say, more and more claustrophobic in our lives. You can see an old person often and how narrow their world becomes, yeah? And what yoga does is the opposite. It allows that sediment to be stirred up again. It breaks up that sediment of the spine. Yeah, not only literally because the spine becomes mobile, but much more interestingly than that, it breaks up the laid down, compressed, ossified emotions and reactions and trauma that's stirred up there, that's stored there, and stirs it up like a muddy pond again. So you're stirring up this muddy pond. As I said, it doesn't happen straight away. I don't think and it shouldn't do. I think that Ashtanga can also be used to put a cap on things, and that's really helpful too. Yeah. Sometimes you just need that cap, get by for a while. On the other hand, after a while, it's going to do that. And people say, the funny thing is people say to you, oh, you're doing yoga, you must be so relaxed. You got to go, well, yeah, because, it doesn't necessarily do that. I mean, it shouldn't do that. If you do it right, it shouldn't do that. It should stir up these past things, impressions, memories, emotions, trauma, all in the body, bring them to light. And then you can take a second look at them again and decide what's relevant and what's not relevant anymore. And just, that's all you have to do is see it in the light of day. Yeah? You can't see those things. They have power over you. As soon as they come up into your consciousness again, it's like steam. Steam arising in the morning. If you imagine this metaphor, steam arises in the morning and the sun rises and it evaporates that steam again. The same, I suggest, that the emotions in the body, that all the stuff stored in the spine, you move it up, comes to the surface, you've got this muddy pond, and having seen that muddy pond, you can then dispel, they just evaporate, they cease to have power over you. And this is the idea of Hatha Yoga. And I think to a great extent, this idea, as people say, of digesting the emotions, the tantric idea of digesting and, in a way, purifying your body through this digestion of emotions. So not purification again in a way of good or bad, just your own stuff coming up and going out, right? So this does work. I mean, it's worked for me, but on the other hand, it's kind of risky as well, right? And it's kind of risky because, yes, it's meant to stir things up, but can you cope with seeing what you need to see, right? Or does it overwhelm you? Because that practice can make people, if you haven't noticed, a bit more ungrounded, a bit more overstimulated, a bit more crazy. Not crazy. I mean, I shouldn't use that word really, but, a bit more ungrounded, let's say, than maybe if they didn't do it even sometimes, right? Because all this stuff has come to the surface again, right? It's easy to keep a lid on things and pretend to be normal. But when all this stuff comes to the surface again, you definitely don't always feel normal in practice. And, I definitely had that experience in Mysore. I know many people did that were with me there, especially when you start putting leg behind the head. Particularly for me, leg behind the head. The back bends, the deep back bends didn't do as much as the kind of torsion you're getting and flexion in the spine with the leg behind the head. That really starts to do something with the emotions and you just feel weird, basically. All this stuff coming up. You don't need to generally put a name on it, oh, that was when my dad did this. Or sometimes it comes like that, but often it's just like emotion. Like you just can't really, it's nebulous, ambiguous. It's just there in the body. Confusion is probably the main kind of qualification you might say about it. And, as long as you can bear it, as long as you can see it and tolerate it, my suggestion is it goes up and out, just dissipates in the clear light of day like steam. Yeah. But can you do that? The problem is, can you do that? And do you have the kind of context and framework and stability in your practice to be able to do that? Yeah. And that's the question, because oftentimes we get into the practice because it's stimulating, yes, stimulating for a reason. But the outside life, in other words, everything around that practice should not be stimulating. Yeah. But it tends to attract those people that like stimulation. They approach the practice for stimulation. Yes, you get that. But then you get the tendency to lead a life which is more stimulating because we like that already. And the practice kind of can make you feel like that, so you do more of that. So then you take loads of coffee and you're going out and you're socializing with loads of people in Mysore, for example, or whatever, feeling very dynamic, very energized, and you just have no grounding or no framework or stability to process those emotions. Again, all this happened to me. I'm not talking off the top of my head, So you need a context around what you're doing to stabilize these emotions coming up so you can tolerate them, so you can clearly see them and fully digest them. Yeah. And this is, I think, what we're lacking in our in what's taught to us about the practice, that there needs to be a calm, steady, peaceful context or lifestyle around the yoga. In other words, the asana is part of it, but the asana is a small part of a whole yoga lifestyle. And the rest of the lifestyle needs to be able to process, digest, and take in what happens in this highly stimulating practice of asana. Yeah. And it is. And I think it's easy, because you do it regularly to think, it's just, it's very, very powerful. It really is. And even me, you kind of forget to think, well, it's just moving the body, isn't it? It's just a body thing, how strong can it be? But it really, really is. So you have to take it seriously. Finally, and before I start telling you how to maybe deal with these negative emotions that arise, or all that arises from this sediment that's stored up in the body through the torsion of the spine, twisting and turning, what you can do is make it more effective still, if you want to. I suggest if you're moving, breathing, and concentrating on those things, it will do the job anyway. Yeah, to get the stuff out, and then it's up to you what you do with it. As I say, yoga doesn't necessarily help you digest. It all depends on the usage. It's like a drug in a way. It just increases what's there. Yeah, it's a fast track to increasing what's there and getting it out. What you do with it is up to you. Doesn't help you necessarily with that. That's the lifestyle part of it. That's yoga as a lifestyle. But you can make it even more effective to get the stuff out of you by the use of compression in the body and bandha. Yeah, so if you use the breath correctly, if you use the idea of bandha correctly, not just as pulling in your lower abdomen, but as breathing and stretching in such a manner that it pressurizes the spine because you're pulling together, not stretching out of yourself, you're then increasing that pressure on the spine, and increasing the pressure on the spine increases the stimulation of those nerves and the breaking up of sediment and the releasing of this into your consciousness, by a certain way of stretching that's not stretching out of yourself, but more stretching into yourself. Anyway, that's a kind of separate subject, isn't it? But what we're here to talk about today is how to process these negative emotions. And first of all, one, admit that they arise. That's natural. And if people tell you yoga's relaxing, then they're talking out of their, it's not meant to be relaxing. Yes, it puts a cap on things sometimes, and you can use it to put a cap on things, and that's great. But really, it's meant to be quite the opposite of relaxing. It's meant to stir things up so you can take a second look. So you're free once again to take a second look and make your mind up about past experiences that are trapping you in the present. It does that physically, mechanically, hardly avoidable, as I said. But how do we deal with that and make it most effective and don't get re-traumatized by the yoga that we're doing? You can kind of re-traumatize you when these things come up, right? Yeah. You can go back into it like a re-triggering, or whatever they say these days, So how do we do that? Well, first of all, as I mentioned with the breathing, you have to do it correctly, right? And, I don't like to say right or wrong, correct or incorrect, but, it's not breathing in the throat. When we talked about ujjayi, or when it was talked about ujjayi and bandha, it's easy to think that's just throat breathing, like very loud and very contracted in the throat, and then pulling in your abdomen as hard as you can. Well, if you pull in your abdomen as hard as you can, then you freeze the diaphragm. Yeah? And the diaphragm is where you want to breathe from. Yeah? That muscle in the middle of your body. You want to breathe from there. It's a regulator. It's a regulator for the nervous system, the diaphragm. If you breathe diaphragmatically, you're restoring and releasing emotions from your body. Yeah, it's a huge trauma release to take a full breath, which is generally a diaphragmatic breath, and that breath isn't in the throat either, is it? So this idea of ujjayi as breathing in the throat, a lot of your tension regulation and your tension responses are in the throat, they're in the neck, right? You get a tense neck, when you get worried or emotional. So you don't want to tense the neck when you're breathing, right? And you certainly don't want to breathe in the throat. That's not the yoga breathing. You want to breathe using the diaphragm, breathe using the bandha, the lower abdomen, to draw the diaphragm down, not just squeeze the abdomen, which freezes the diaphragm. So you want to use the bandha to draw the diaphragm down. And that to me is the really deeper use of bandha, rather than just using the abdomen to, to pull it in, which is what I used to do. I'm again talking about my own experience. So neither do you want to feel a loud sound, hear a loud sound, or feel a contraction in the throat. Right? You want to have a slightly narrowed area of the throat, so you can take the air down slowly, in which case it will contact the diaphragm. If you can't breathe slowly, methodically, i.e. incrementally, slowly, same air pressure, 1 and 2 and 3, same air pressure, and you just breathe in a puff, it doesn't work. You can't contact the diaphragm. You'll just breathe around the clavicle, around your collarbone, in the throat. So you need to be able to not contract, but narrow slightly the area of the lower, the glottis area, the throat, but not contract the throat, Narrow it, but don't contract it. So, 1, reappraise the use of ujjayi and bandha. That's 1. 2, take longer in the postures. I think the practice is generally practiced too fast. It was 8 or 10 breaths originally in Mysore. This got slowed down, speeded up, because of numbers. Numbers made the need to get people through faster, so the breaths became reduced in each posture, but it was a longer stay, and often people stayed longer still. The practice is probably too fast these days, right? So if you feel like you need to stay longer some days, don't do so much practice. Just do less postures, more breaths. Yeah, don't have to do all the practice every day. So not all day. To that end, you don't always have to do the same practice. Don't always have to do your whole practice and the same practice every day. Respect your body. That's another tip. Respect your body. And some days you already feel overstimulated. You already feel overtired, drained, perhaps emotionally or physically or mentally drained. So you do a practice according to that. You're still using the same tools of Ashtanga, i.e. diaphragmatic breathing, stretching in compression, pulling together. Yeah. But you're not using it the same manner. Maybe you're using it for grounding. You stay in the asanas longer. You don't do the whole practice. You pick some asanas, right? There's like a blueprint. Yeah. Doesn't mean you have to do the whole thing every day to be a traditional, in quotes, Ashtangi. Yeah. So use the practice accordingly. And you're a human being, not a robot. So your practice should change from day to day. Right. So stay in postures longer. Breathe deeply. Make sure you breathe deeply, and make sure perhaps you breathe more thoroughly than just the idea of this Ujjayi and Bandha as it's simplistically taught, let's say. And the other thing then, I guess, is that you have to, basically you have to contextualize it in a whole lifestyle, right? Sorry, one thing before I come to the lifestyle part, is that use the closing sequence. The closing sequence is really I can't believe I forgot this. The ultimate panacea is the closing sequence. So the closing sequence is there for grounding, calming, restoring quality on the nervous system you've just stimulated. You've stimulated it in practice. Now you're going to ground it and calm it down. Right? So if you don't take a long closing, if you don't do closing at all, I have to admit, hand on heart, I used to skip closing sometimes. Didn't have time. Crazy now to think about it. And I always used to feel overstimulated and not great. Long closing sequence, and fundamentally in the closing sequence, breath is longer and there should be no pressure on the neck. The neck in the closing sequence is fundamental. You should not take pressure on the neck in shoulder stand or headstand, right? So how do you do that? If you're feeling like you're taking pressure in shoulder stand, use a blanket underneath the shoulders. The neck lies over the top of that. If you feel it in headstand, maybe change the position of the hands. Use blocks, even, or a little something underneath the arms slightly, so you can raise the shoulders a bit, so the head doesn't take so much pressure. Do it against the wall. Don't go up in it every day. Strengthening, so you can take the weight. The headstand should be weight through the arms and shoulders. It should not be weight in the head. It's a misnomer because it's not called headstand. It's called Shesh Asana, head position. So the weight is not in the head. Yeah. Same with shoulder stand. That's fundamental because that freedom of the neck, the relaxation of these muscles of the neck, is tantamount to relaxing and restoring and regulating a stimulating effect that's happened to you in asana practice. So use it accordingly. The closing sequence is there for a reason. Yeah. And when you don't do it, you will notice. Yep. So you can experiment. Try not doing it one day and see what happens. I mean, it won't kill you for one day, but don't do it for many days. You will notice. You certainly will notice. Anyway, the final thing dealing with negative emotions is the whole lifestyle. This is the main thing. Yoga is a lifestyle, and there's so few of us that really want to approach yoga as a lifestyle because we like the stimulation of asana practice. And so we use the asana practice as a further stimulation in our lives. And really the asana practice is not that. It's doing something else really, and as I've said, what it's doing is it's trying to restore and resolve past experiences, karma, trauma. Yes, again, I think that the two words are very similar. Trauma is obviously always negative. Karma is always not necessarily negative. Could be good or bad. All impressions are karma. Yeah, vasanas or samskaras laid down in the body. Anyway, so a yoga lifestyle. What does that mean? It means, well, just the obvious. Look at your diet. Experiment with your diet. There's no one way, and this will change over the years as well. As you get older, as you do different things, you need different things. So experiment with your diet and grounding foods. Some use of heavier foods if you're feeling overstimulated will help. And just play around with it. And see what works for you. That may be vegetarian. I hesitate to say that may not be vegetarian all the time, Perhaps a vegetarian diet doesn't suit all people, although ethically, obviously, it's the preferable choice. Realizing that we do harm in the world anyway, whether we're just turning on a light switch or walking down the road, we're affecting so many beings, killing loads of bugs, for example, but also affecting many, many people in our actions that we don't realize, that faces others behind, that are, suffering in other places, so we can have our comfort. So, violence is inherent in life. Perhaps I would say, and I know some will disagree, whether, the eating of an animal flesh now and again, or even regularly, isn't necessarily the worst thing you can do in terms of violence. You're doing it anyway. Yeah. So it's a bigger subject, and perhaps I won't go further into it now. Maybe on a later podcast I can. But yeah, we know that the Buddhists, many of them, the Dalai Lama, for example, eats meat because, yes, violence is inherent in life. But another subject, obviously a breach of literal ahimsa, and for many people, a big no-no. But so use grains and beans as grounding. Watch your coffee and caffeine intake. Watch your sugar intake. Get sleep, try and sleep properly. Even if you don't sleep when you go to bed, just stay there and rest your mind. Don't get on the phone if you can't sleep, obvious things, don't watch the stimulating stuff before you go to bed. Yeah. Keep your phone somewhere place where you can't grab it if you can't sleep, but stay in bed, and, sleep is the most important thing probably you can do to restore your body. That. To have sleep. And finally, I suppose, just things like what you do with your social life, right? Like, watch the company you take. If you're speaking, just rubbish with loads of company, I put my hand up and say, I could spend a lot of time just speaking rubbish to people because it's fun. Watch the stimulating effect that people can have on you, it's tempting to just go out and be with people all the time for extroverts like myself. But, it overstimulates you. So, we need to, Patabi Joyce, remember in the Yoga Mala says, watch stimulating places. Don't go to stimulating places. I think he even lists the theatre there or something. Not that many of us go to the theatre these days. Anyways, so the whole yoga lifestyle, and it's a disciplined, regulated lifestyle. Yes, I know it's boring, but, some pattern and way of living that contextualizes your asana practice is essential if you want it to work. If you really want this thing to work, it has to be slotted in. It has to be the hub, the foundation, the center of a whole lifestyle, which you can process the stuff that comes up in the asana. If it doesn't have that around it, then I think it ends up being a lid or a suppressant or a way to close down on these things that come up, because it's like you're stimulating them, but the body mind can't really take it, and then it puts a lid on them more, So it ends up just being a blocker, where if it's contextualized in a whole lifestyle and your subconscious feels like it can deal with the stuff that comes up, it allows it. Yep. Otherwise, I think it can actually further ingrain things as they come up and they get pushed back again. They get deeper ingrained or lodged in the body, perhaps. Yeah. So the yoga lifestyle is the main thing, and that's a routine, a way of living, a rhythm to life. And it's it's a challenge because we tend to want to do things spontaneously and at the moment, and new things and exciting things attract us. Yeah, but that's yoga, isn't it? Trying to keep with ourselves rather than the wish to be away from ourselves, and stimulation and novelty, experiences. But we're looking at consciousness and doing something with our consciousness. We have to keep pointing the arrow back to ourselves where it wants to point in every other place to avoid that, for some reason, right? Well, for some reason, because there's a lot of stuff inside that needs to be seen and needs to be dealt with, right? It's a big project, But yeah, so you can do it in many ways. I'm not saying you have to do it this way. I did it for many ways, not really supporting myself in terms of yoga lifestyle, drinking too much coffee, not eating properly, not taking a proper care of my rhythm of life. And I don't really think, as I say, that it fully did its job until I could do that. But, until you can do that, you do what you can. So for what it's worth, think of these ideas, and if they mean anything to you, then great. If they don't, just keep doing your practice anyway, and then one day maybe they will. And as I said at the start, if you feel that there's anything else you want me to discuss, or just stay in my box, as many people say, I'm happy to do that as well. But if you have listened to the whole of this and enjoyed it, then thanks for bearing with me and listening to this. And just let me know if you want me to turn my attention to anything else.